We're going to talk about DNS attacks. We're going to talk about a DNS poisoning attack and how we defend against that using something called DNS Security. One more time, let's go over how DNS should work. The client wants to know the IP address of bestbuy.com. It goes to its DNS server, ISP, corporate, Google, whoever. If the server knows, it tells us. If it doesn't know, then it goes out to the DNS system on the internet, asks the root. The root will redirect us to the appropriate top level domain, in this case a .com, VeriSign. VeriSign will know who registered that domain name, bestbuy.com, and send us to the registrar. For instance, GoDaddy. GoDaddy will point us to its DNS servers, its name servers. Now, later we'll talk about an SOA, a source of authority. One of those name servers is the king. It's the one we manually update, and the updates get propagated to the other name servers, in this case controlled by GoDaddy. One of those name servers will reply back to the DNS server we're using with the result, and the DNS server will send the result to us, the client. That's how it should work. What could possibly go wrong? So the attack we're going to talk about is DNS cache poisoning. This is another very popular exam topic. And how does it work? As before, my client is asking for an IP address for a domain, bestbuy.com. In this case, it is not already cached in my browser. It is not already cached in my host file, which it shouldn't be, and it's not cached in the resolver in the operating system. So off we go and we ask a DNS server, what is the IP address for this particular domain? Now it sends a request to the internet. It sends it to the root system of DNS. And the normal sequence should start. It should go down to TLD, it should go down to the registrar, and the registrar should reply to us. However, in this case, the attacker is able to listen to our request, perhaps by taking over one of the routers on the internet on the way to the DNS system. Now the attackers heard our request. Now what should happen is the normal chain of events. But what happens instead is the attacker replies back to us more quickly. And in normal DNS, the first person to reply is the answer we trust. Even if the real answer comes later, it's ignored because we take the first answer we get, and now we have the wrong IP address for bestbuy.com. Instead of having 23.198.241.2, if that's what it is, we have 4.5.6.7. And guess what? This hacker has some kind of phishing website ready to go with that IP address to take our credentials and possibly our credit card number. This is one of the ways we can carry out a phishing attack. Now another way for a phishing attack is just to have a link in the email that takes us to a fake IP address. No weaponization of the DNS system is required in that case. That's why you should never, ever, 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 ever click on a link before very carefully inspecting it if you know how to do so. If you don't know how to do so, just don't do it. So, how do we defend ourselves? Well, we're going to use something called DNS Security. Now, DNS Security is done from the DNS server up. It has nothing to do with the client. As a client, as the end party, I have nothing to do with this. I cannot specify it. Whoever is running our DNS server, whether it be our ISP or our corporate IT group, they have to set this up. And basically what they're going to do is load in a bunch of certificates and public keys of trusted DNS servers. And they will only trust a reply if that DNS response is signed by somebody who's trusted. Now there's a thing called root of trust where one person can sign a cert for another person who can sign a cert for another person, so they don't have to be completely separate certificates. This is just easier to explain, that we're going to have all the trusted servers have a certificate we trust. We're not going to go into how that is done, but in reality it's done with a thing called a root of trust. So in this case, we go to our trusted DNS server. It has a bunch of public keys and certificates preloaded on it for replies that can be trusted. If it's not signed with one of these certificates, it's ignored. goes out, does our normal DNS process. It gets down to GoDaddy. GoDaddy replies with a signed response. Our DNS server accepts that response and then sends it back to us and updates its own cache records. That's how DNS security works. Now, as end users, as clients, what can we do to secure our DNS traffic? Well, we can use two systems that are commonly out there that are very effective: DOH and DOT. Now, DOH is DNS over HTTPS and DOT is DNS over TLS, and they're both fairly similar. They build a tunnel around our DNS traffic. It's sent via TCP rather than UDP 53 for normal DNS. So we build a tunnel. Our traffic going to that DNS server is encrypted. Nobody, including our ISP, can see what domains we're asking for. So it keeps at least what we're searching for private. However, if we just go to that website next, our ISP knows we went to that website. So how secure is it? It's not particularly. However, let's get back to it. DOH, very common exam question. It's DNS over HTTPS secure. It uses port 443, just like normal HTTPS. It's implemented in most modern browsers by default, and you can turn it on and turn it off if you want. We can also specify in our operating system to use DOH as well. Now, a particular example of an implementation of DOH is Oblivious DOH, and that's been created by Apple to give us even more privacy. In Oblivious DOH, we send our request to a proxy hosted by Apple. Apple allegedly doesn't remember who asked the question. The proxy goes and does the DNS request for us, gets back the response, and then sends it to us. All the time not really remembering, at least long term, who we were looking up. So this is like NordVPN for DNS. You can implement it on iPhones, iPads. You need to go to your settings, Apple ID, cloud, and use the term turn on private relay. And then you'll be good to go. So it's a pretty good privacy step. Now, the other one we might see on an exam is DOT, DNS over TLS. It uses a different port, 852, very, very similar to DOH, just uses a different port number. And that is turned on by default on most Android operating systems, DOH and DOT. Now, how do we turn on DOH in Windows? Well, we can do it at the OS level. So instead of our computer looking up on UDP port 53 and everyone being able to look at that traffic, we can go to settings. We go to the Wi-Fi or the network card that we're using, the connection that's active, and we want to edit our network settings. And here we can go in and we can turn on our DNS over HTTPS. We turn it on. By default, this is the profile or the template used, Cloudflare, which is the common profile or template, but we're setting our DNS server not to Cloudflare. Here I've set it to 1.1.1.1. That's just the DNS provider I like to use. And here's our alternative DNS server. In case 1.1.1.1 goes down, we have 1.0.0.1, which is also just a backup IP address for 1.1.1.1. And that's how you turn it on your Windows computer. So this is something you do have control over. You can set it in your browser, just for that browser, and you can set it at the operating system as well.